friends, viewers, supporters, haters, and lurkers. All of you who may be watching this, I want you to get clear on a few things. Now, when I talk about the people watching this, the way this generally works on this YouTube channel is you've got a layer of people that are members of CPI or close friends that watch every channel. Those are the people I would call fans, friends, activists. Those are our people. And then there's also a layer of people who watch these streams who don't like me for whatever reason. They don't agree with me. They are attracted to some fandom on the internet that is turned against us or whatever. And there's people that watch these streams but don't like me. I don't know why they do that to themselves, right? If I didn't like somebody, I wouldn't watch them, right? But there are some people who are haters who watch these streams. And lurkers. There's a lot of those folks. There are people who watch these streams but are silent. They don't leave comments on the YouTube, on the channel. They don't participate in the chat. They just kind of watch silently. They absorb the message. They find it educational, entertaining, but they don't really want to get involved. They want to remain anonymous. They're the lurkers. And all are welcome, right? Hate watchers are welcome. Obviously, our community, who this stream is for, are welcome. And even the hate watchers are welcome. Even the lurkers are welcome, right? We do these streams for everybody. These streams are up there for everybody to see, and I keep doing them. And I really appreciate doing them, and especially the people that are in the chats every night. I really value you, and I really value being able to engage with you. I really value being able to spread the knowledge that I have and that I know on these streams. So we have a variety of people who watch these streams for different reasons. And we do them very often, right? We do them, almost every night I'm on here. We do them consistently. We have certain themes we come back to. We have certain positions that we take. And what we do here is very special. And I really value all of you. So everyone who's listening, fans, friends, comrades, lurkers, haters, all of you, I think it's about time we clarified a few things. Because it can get a little bit messy and confusing. It can get more than a little bit messy and confusing now. It used to be that nobody talked about the ideas that I espoused on these streams. They were obscure and niche. Now there's a lot of confusion in society, and a lot of people are talking about the kind of things that we talk about on these streams. And it's about time that we just clarified a few things and just made it clear what we mean by certain words and what the focus should be. We need to make that clear because there's a lot of confusion about that. And if you are new, which I really hope you are, I really hope that people watching this are new people are who I want to talk to. If you are new, it can be very, very confusing. It can be extremely confusing because there's a lot of people talking about these ideas and concepts in ways that are very, very different from the way that I talk about them. So let's just get down to business. Let's get down to business. What is capitalism? What does the word mean? Because there's a lot of confusion about it. I have heard many different definitions of capitalism. One definition of capitalism that I've heard all my life is that capitalism is when you have money. It's owning stuff. And that's a definition you hear from a lot of Americans that think they like capitalism because they're like, I like owning stuff. I own my house. I'm a capitalist. I own my car. I'm a capitalist. Well, wrong. That's not what the word means. And now you also get definitions of capitalism that are less positive, but they're still wrong. I've heard people say capitalism means income inequality. It means that some people have more of an income than other people. That is not what capitalism means. I've heard people say that capitalism is when the government works for the very rich. It's like that's technically not what capitalism means. That happens in a capitalist society, sure, but that's not what the word actually means. The definition of capitalism, or at least the one that we use on this stream, and the one that we have popularized over the past few years, the one that you will find in our manual, We Are City Builders. Capitalism is production organized for profit. Frederick Engels, he said, under capitalism, the means of production function only as preliminary transformation into capital. The means of production function only as preliminary transformation into capital. Now, what does that mean? Well, basically, it means that we don't, this shirt was not made for any other reason than money could be made off of it. The factory where this shirt was made assembled the materials, the shirt was created, it was then taken to a store and sold for money, and that's the whole reason it was created. It was preliminary transformation into capital. There was a capitalist who had some money, and he wanted to make more money. So he started a company that made shirts, and he hired some people, and he got some materials together, and they made the shirts, and the shirts were sold, and the little bit of money he started out with became more money. Preliminary transformation into capital. We don't have roads. I'm sorry, better example. We don't have food so people can eat it. We have food because agribusiness and big box stores and corporations like Kraft and Nestle and Coca-Cola need to make money. We don't have homes to live in. I'm sitting here in an apartment. Was this building built because I needed a place to stay? Of course not. It was built because the land was owned by a capitalist, and the capitalist wanted to make more money from his land, and so he built an apartment building on top of it and then started renting it out in order to make more money. Right? This apartment building was constructed as preliminary transformation into capital. A more simple way of putting it is that profits are in command. And that's how Mao put it in the little red book and in other places. Mao described the capitalist system as profits are in command. It is an economy where everything happens in order to generate profit for private owners. You have a group of private owners who have money, and they set up a whole apparatus that is designed to bring them more money, right? They have money, so they start an airline. People get on the airline. People buy tickets to the airline. Airline workers are hired, and that results in them having more money. Right? There's many examples of this. But capitalism is an economy where profits are in command. And that's why people who think that the issue is worker cooperatives are missing the point. Let's say you had a company where the workers were also the shareholders. Well, that might be more fair because they're getting a share of what they produce. Instead of getting a wage, they're getting a share of the profit. It may be more egalitarian, but they're still trying to maximize profit. At the end of the day, the company starts out with a certain amount of money, and then production is carried out, and at the end of the day, they need more money. So it's still production according to profit. And that company, even though it may be egalitarian, even though the profits may be shared, if it's going to survive in the market, It needs to compete with other companies, and it needs to expand production, and it has to increase its profits. It has to do what is profitable, even if those profits are shared. So worker cooperatives, as long as they are functioning within a market, as long as they are trying to increase their profits and the return on their investment, are still capitalism. Capitalism is a society where profits are in command. It is an economy based on preliminary transformation of the means of production. And this is a really important point because there's so much confusion about it, right? And what about the government? And people say, well, if the government is involved, then it becomes socialism. No. Every capitalist society that has ever existed has had a government that builds roads. Why does the government build roads? Is that communism? No. It's because that facilitates the market. In order for people to drive to the stores and buy the products of capitalists, in order for workers to drive to work and sell their labor power to capitalists, in order for capitalists to transport the products that they produce, there's got to be roads. And so the state facilitates the market by building roads. The US Constitution requires that a postal service be in existence. And why is that? Is it because the US government's communist and it wants to have a government monopoly? No, it's because if there's only private delivery mechanisms, that doesn't facilitate the market very well. And it's necessary that there be a government that oversees the mailing of postage and the delivering of messages, etc. That's important. And the reason that it is important is because that is a way to facilitate the market. Postage, mailing, is a really big part of facilitating the market. And there's always a state to facilitate the capitalist market. The post office is not socialism. The roads are not socialism. Socialism is not the government doing stuff. And I've never maintained that. I've always said that that is not what socialism is. Socialism is not worker cooperatives that function according to profit. And socialism is not the government doing stuff. Socialism, and this is where things get interesting. Socialism is when society as a whole takes control of the economy and profits are not in command any longer. Socialism is when the means of production, the banks, the factories, the major industries, the centers of economic power, are forced to work in the interest of society as a whole and not simply operating to maximize profit for private owners. Socialism is the negation of capitalism. It is a society where profits are no longer in command. It is a society in which the people, the population overall, as a group, has seized control of the means of production. And those two definitions are extremely important because nowadays people think socialism is the redistribution of income. Well, that happens in every society to some degree or other. The roads in my city are paid for with taxes. And those taxes are the redistribution of income to pay for the roads. Does that mean that it's socialism? No. I mean, every society in history redistributes wealth. Every society in history has the government carry out certain functions. Some societies are more free market than others. Some societies have more of a welfare state that provides benefits to the population, but that is not the difference between capitalism and socialism. Capitalism is profits in command. Socialism is society as a group controlling the means of production. But gets a little more complicated because we don't live in the era of ordinary capitalism. We live in the era of imperialism, which is capitalism in its monopolistic stage. Starting in the 1880s, 1890s, we developed a period where banks became dominant over industries. Gigantic corporations based in the Western countries began spreading their tentacles all across the world. Instead of exporting products, we now had a situation where there was the export of capital, where the corporations themselves started spreading all over the world, and banks became dominant. There was the emergence of what Lenin called an international financial oligarchy. Big bankers sat at the center of big trusts, cartels, and syndicates, big groups of corporations that functioned as monopolies. And these monopolies began spreading out all over the world, seizing territory, seizing parts of the world as theirs. And when you had the export of capital, when Africa and Asia and Latin America became dominated by Western corporations, this prevented them from developing. This kept them in a state of underdevelopment. It prevented them from building their own industries, their own development. It led to a situation where the country was held under the grip of foreign corporations, and its ability to lift itself up out of poverty, develop its own economy, was restricted. And this is capitalism in its monopolistic stage of imperialism. It's not individual capitalists controlling the economy of one country. It is ultra-wealthy capitalists in Western countries dominating the entire world. That's capitalism in its monopoly stage. And then that raises the question, what does that mean for socialism, right? Socialism and capitalism are at odds with one another in the classical understanding, right? In the regular classical capitalist industrial economy, the capitalists own the factories. The bulk of society are workers who work in the factories. The capitalists control the government and own the government and use the government for their own ends. The workers are oppressed. The workers form labor unions. They form a mass popular movement. And socialism is that, those labor unions and that mass popular movement seizing control of the government, winning the battle for democracy, and then using the government to force the economy to work in the interests of society at all, to nationalize and make the means of production public property. And that's socialism. But imperialism makes it complicated. It makes it very complicated. It's no longer simply about the workers in an individual country getting together to push back against the power of the capitalists. It's about a global struggle. And as those corporations in America and Britain and France and Germany were becoming imperialists, as they were becoming imperialistic monopolies, in order to spread themselves all over the world, they needed to have peace at home. And some of the workers in France and Germany and Britain and America benefited from imperialism. Not all the workers, but some of them. And because those corporations were spreading their tentacles all over the world, they weren't just making profits, they were making super profits. And the workers of the colonized and oppressed countries, they were not just exploited, they were super exploited. But with their super profits that the imperialists were making, they could afford to buy off some of the workers at home and give them a more comfortable life. And the main way they did it was with reformist socialist parties, reformist socialist movements. A section of the socialist movement stopped struggling to overthrow the capitalists and simply saw its job as facilitating more of a welfare state at home. And these reformist elements, who fought for things that were very noble, fought for the minimum wage, fought for public education, fought for health care benefits and all of that, they weren't doing this because they wanted to overthrow the capitalists. They were doing this because they wanted the capitalist society at home to be more stable so it could dominate the world. And that in order to have imperialism, you needed a layer of people in the homeland who were loyal to the empire. You needed a group of working class people who would go out there and wave the flag and support the war. You needed a group of working class people who would send their sons and daughters to go die and colonize places in Africa and Asia and Latin America. And so fake socialists became an essential part of imperialism. You could not have imperialism without fake socialists. And why are these socialists fake? Because they are not fighting to overthrow imperialism. They are fighting simply to have the government be more involved in the economy and give benefits to certain workers in order to stabilize the homeland so that the big corporations and banks in the Western countries can dominate the entire world. Social imperialists, social democracy, this wing of the socialist and communist movement has always played this role. Their job is to make imperialism work better by making sure that some of the super profits get redistributed and making sure you have class peace at home by giving some of the working class benefits that buy their loyalty to empire. Now, that's very confusing, but imperialism, monopolistic capitalism, needs fake socialists. And around the world, countries are struggling against imperialism. The imperialists are keeping Africa poor. They're keeping Asia poor. They're keeping Latin America poor. But they're not just keeping the workers of Latin America poor. And they're not just keeping the workers of Africa poor. And they're not just keeping the workers of Asia poor. They also are keeping the capitalists of Africa poor. And they're keeping the capitalists of Asia poor. And they're keeping the capitalists of Latin America poor because they don't want competition. And when they hold back development in these oppressed countries, they're not simply holding back a workers' revolution. They're holding back capitalism. They don't want wealthy people to emerge in Africa that are making profits. They want the profits from Africa's natural resources to go into their pockets. They don't want wealthy Asians to emerge to make profits from the wealth and labor of Asia. They want all the wealth and labor of Asia to go into their pockets. And many of the people who oppose imperialism around the world are capitalists. They're capitalists who are against the imperialist monopolies. However, they're too weak. They are too weak to fight the ultra monopolies. And we've learned over the course of the 20th century that the only way that nations can be free from imperialism is with socialism. And in fact, the way that socialism has come into the world has not been workers in Western countries getting together and seizing their factories and seizing control of the government. Instead, it has been countries in the colonized world who are dominated by the imperialists. The working class, the peasantry, and even the capitalists of third world countries deciding that their whole country needs to be free from imperialism. So they bond together and they form a revolutionary anti-imperialist movement. And their revolutionary anti-imperialist movement puts the working class and the peasantry into motion, but it has some capitalists aligned with it. And it is a movement of national liberation that kicks out the imperialists and then builds a socialist economy. On the Chinese flag, you have one big star that represents the Chinese Communist Party, and then you have 4 other stars. And those 4 other stars are the block of 4 great classes: the workers, the peasants, the urban capitalists, and the national bourgeoisie. And these are 4 groups of people, including the capitalists of China, all who are getting the shit kicked out of them by the imperialists. And so the Communist Party brought this block of 4 great classes together, formed an alliance to kick out the imperialists. And every socialist revolution that has ever happened has been an anti-imperialist revolution. The Cuban Revolution, the Korean Revolution, the Eastern European countries that have had socialism, Libya under the leadership of Gaddafi, Bolivarian socialism in Latin America, Ba'athist Arab socialism. It hasn't been a pure workers' struggle to seize their factory. It has been a national struggle against imperialism. And those national capitalists, those capitalists who are against the imperialists, they can be a very, very important part of an anti-colonial movement. And I've pointed out many times on these streams, after the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks had a conference in Baku in Azerbaijan. And they invited all kinds of people from all over Asia and all over the Middle East. And they said, as long as you're fighting the British Empire, we'll work with you. They supported the Emir of Afghanistan, who was a conservative monarchist. Why did they support the Emir of Afghanistan? Because he was fighting the imperialists. He was a monarchist. There were capitalists who were fighting the imperialists. That was fine. And they didn't support the fake socialists of the Western countries. They said they were socialists. They said they wanted to give everyone free health care. They said but they were supporting imperialism. In our time, the issue is not, are you a capitalist or are you a socialist? The issue is, are you for this dying system of imperialism or are you against it? That is the issue in our time. And this is something that many fools cannot understand. Many fools, think that they got me because I've said we're not against capitalism. We're against imperialism. Well, actually, if you read Lenin, that makes sense. The Chinese communists aligned with the national bourgeoisie of their homeland, the national capitalists, in order to defeat imperialism. And today, capitalists are an essential part of socialism with Chinese characteristics. In Cuba, Fidel Castro aligned with many national capitalists to drive out American imperialism. And today, in Cuba, there are many capitalists and small business owners that are an essential part of Cuban socialism. We are not against someone opening a store. We are not against somebody starting their own restaurant. We are not against somebody starting a small business. And in fact, in socialist countries, the state that controls the economy goes out of its way to help capitalists. You go to China, you go to Vietnam, you go to Cuba, you go to Nicaragua, the government goes out of its way to help these capitalists help build up their economy. They have a centrally planned economy. Society controls the means of production, but some of those means of production that are regulated and controlled by all of society are privately owned, are the ideas of creative people, of entrepreneurs, right? And because they are trying to defeat imperialism, and because they are building up a planned economy, a socialist economy to defeat the imperialists, small business owners are part of 21st century socialism. Meanwhile, one thing we don't support is fake socialists. In Britain, one of the main political parties, the ruling political party in Britain, is a socialist party. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, is a socialist. But he's a socialist who gives billions of British people's taxpayer money to Israel so they can murder the Palestinians. He's a socialist who is sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. He is a socialist who is helping preside over the impoverishment of people in Africa and Latin America. And he might call himself a socialist, and he might say he's for the working man, and he might even provide benefits. They have a national health care service. It doesn't fucking matter because he's an imperialist. So even if he says he's for socialism, even if he wants to redistribute the imperialist super profits in a more egalitarian way, even if he says he's against racism, even if he sings the Internationale, it doesn't matter because he's an imperialist. Meanwhile, the Islamic Republic of Iran, they say they're against communism, they're against Marxism, they are conservative Shia Muslims. But in order to defeat the imperialists, they've had to create basically a centrally planned economy. The largest economic entity in Iran is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And the government controls the oil, and the government controls the major industries, and they have these neighborhood assemblies called Basij councils that carry out the goals of the revolution on a local level. And Iran might say, oh, we hate communism, we hate socialism, but the reality is they are fighting the imperialists. The reality is their best friend is Russia, their best friend is China, their best friend is Venezuela, their best friend is Cuba and Nicaragua, their best friend is Vietnam. And they might say they're against socialism, but they're fighting the imperialists. And if you fight the imperialists, you more or less have to become a socialist. And that's the point. I have no loyalty to anybody because they say, I am a communist, I am a socialist. There's loads of clowns out there who support imperialism who think they're socialists. Why would any self-respecting anti-imperialist, anyone who comes from the tradition of Lenin and Marx and all of that, have any loyalty to somebody just because they say, I'm a socialist? The whole point of Lenin, you read Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. You read the Critique and the Fall of the Second International. You read Imperialism and the Split in Socialism. The whole point he's making is that if you are for imperialism, you ain't a fucking socialist. And on top of that, he says that if you're fighting the imperialists, I don't care if you're the Emir of Afghanistan, I don't care if you're a Shia Muslim, I don't care what you call yourself. You could be a capitalist, you can be a monarchist, but if you're fighting the imperialists, you're on our side because imperialism is the main enemy. That is the movement that is saving the world right now. That is the movement that brought us the BRICS. That is the movement that broke China free from being the sick man of Asia and turned it into the second largest economy in the world. That is the movement that made Russia a superpower, that defeated the Nazis and invented space travel. That's the movement that made Cuba what it is today and raised people out of poverty and created the world's greatest medical school. That's the movement that eradicated poverty all throughout Nicaragua and has built a strong, prosperous economy in a Central American country that used to be under the grip of the imperialists. That is the movement that raised the people of Iran up and made them proud of their homeland again and built a modern economy and lifted so many people out of poverty in Iran. That's the movement that produced the Houthis that are standing up and fighting back against Israel and shaking the whole world. People from the poorest country in the world that are standing up and fighting back, people of the land. And at this point, probably the majority of anti-imperialists don't identify with the word communism. And a lot of them do. It's probably about 50-50. In China, they certainly do. In Vietnam, they certainly do. And in Cuba, they certainly do. But in Latin America, the anti-imperialists, they use the term Bolivarian socialism. In Nicaragua, they are explicitly Christian in their government. They have Christianity in their constitution. Their slogan is Christianity, Socialism, and Solidarity. In Iran, they are Shia Muslims. In Yemen, they are Shia Muslims. It's complicated. But many of the anti-imperialists around the world do not identify with communism or Marxism-Leninism. The Chinese do, but the Russians don't. The Russians don't call themselves that. That's part of their heritage. They're very proud of everything that the Soviet Union did. And they very much consider the fall of the Soviet Union to be a devastating moment in the history of their country. But at this point, the Russians say, no, we're not the Soviet Union anymore. Well, that doesn't matter. They're opposing the imperialists. And as they oppose the imperialists, they become more and more socialistic. And so that doesn't matter. Meanwhile, in the last decade, it used to be that nobody in America ever called themselves a socialist. Being a socialist in America meant you were like from the planet Saturn. From about the 1950s until about 10 years ago, nobody in America ever called themselves a socialist. It was like the worst thing you could ever be, to be a socialist. Well, out of the blue, thanks to Bernie Sanders and some others, now there's a bunch of people walking around America going, I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist. Oh boy, I'm a socialist. Ye golly, oh boy, I'm a socialist. You know, I got me a socialist hat and I got me some socialist shoes and I read me some socialist books. I got a socialist college professor and gee golly, I'm a socialist. Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, I am. And there's a lot of people walking around like that. But the overwhelming majority of those people, they might say, gee golly, you know, I'm a socialist, yeah. They might say that. But they support the Nazis in Ukraine fighting against Russia. They want to tear down China. They support Israel murdering the Palestinians. They think Venezuela is a brutal dictatorship. They think Nicaragua is a brutal dictatorship. They hate the Islamic Republic of Iran. So it doesn't fucking matter. They can say, oh, you know, I call myself a socialist, but what? It doesn't matter. That's the point. You can call yourself whatever you want. But if you're for imperialism, you are on the wrong side. And on top of that, you can call yourself whatever you want. But if you're against imperialism, you are on the right side. And what in the 20th century called itself communism Marxism-Leninism in the 20th century represented a global movement against imperialism. That's what Marxism-Leninism represented. But even starting in the 60s and 70s, it started to change. You had African socialism with Kwame Nkrumah. You had Ba'athist Arab socialism. Eventually, you had the Islamic Revolution of Iran. Marxism-Leninism in the 20th century was the global anti-imperialist movement. Now it's gotten much more complicated. But imperialism is still the enemy, and anti-imperialism is still the future. And that's what it's all about. And especially now, in anti-imperialist countries, national capitalists, capitalists that are loyal to the homeland, capitalists that are opposed to imperialism, capitalists that align with a socialist government that controls the means of production, are an essential part of it. So we are in a period where it doesn't make sense, internationally or domestically, to fight to own the word communism. It doesn't make any sense to fight to own the word communism, because what are you owning? What are you owning? We are anti-imperialists. We are opposed to imperialism. We align with the forces around the world that oppose imperialism. And our job is to tell the working people in the American country and in the imperialist countries that their real enemy is at home, that their real enemy is not Iran or Russia or China. Their real enemy is on Wall Street. Their real enemy is the big banks who dominate, and that we have a common enemy and a common interest with the people of the world that are struggling against imperialism. And that ultimately we seek to build an anti-monopoly coalition to unite all here in the United States that are opposed to the monopolistic and imperialist corporations. That includes small business owners. That includes, unemployed people. That includes homeless people. That includes factory workers. That includes all kinds of different people. We seek to build an anti-monopoly coalition. And what we need here in the United States is a socialist government, but in the way we understand it, an anti-imperialist government. A government that fights for you and me against Jeff Bezos and against the big bankers and against the big monopolies. We don't want a government that helps the big monopolies dominate the world and gives us a bigger chunk of it. No, we want to kick Jeff Bezos' ass. We want to destroy ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron. We want a government of action that will fight for working families. We want a government that doesn't send people across the world to kill and die for big monopolies, but instead hires all the young people and all the unemployed and underemployed people to rebuild this country, to lift up the parts of this country that have been economically devastated. That is what we are fighting for. We want a government of action that will fight for working families, that will control the means of production, that will rescue our country from the imperialists, and will control the means of production in order to economically benefit all of us and rationally organize the economy so that growth and expansion and living standards can continue to rise and our children can enjoy a better life. What we are fighting for is socialism, in the sense that China has it, in the sense that Venezuela and Cuba has it, in the sense that Iran may not call it that, but that's what they have, in the sense that Russia may not call it that, but that's what they have. We are fighting for an anti-monopoly government that controls the means of production and works on behalf of all of society, including capitalists, small business owners, people who own a bar or a restaurant in their neighborhood, people who invent a new tech idea, a new innovation in computers, people that perform a useful service, that they innovate as entrepreneurs. We're not against capitalists in our struggle to have an economy where profits are not in command. We are not against business owners and capitalists being part of an overall planned economy. And this is how we understand socialism. Socialism is anti-imperialism. Socialism is defeating the power of the big monopolies, and in order to do it, having a government that fights on behalf of the people against the big monopolies. A government of action that fights for working families, that creates a planned economy in order to ensure economic growth. And our understanding is that after there has been enough economic growth, after hundreds of years of economic growth, no longer restrained by the irrationality of capitalism, that we can have a world with so much wealth and so much abundance that the need for a government will fade away, that labor will become life's prime want and no longer a necessity. People will work because they want to not be bored, because they want to enjoy creating something. And that there'll be enough to go around. No one will ever feel a need to hoard anything. And that social hierarchies will melt away. Everyone will pretty much be equal because there's so much to go around. No one's hoarding from anyone else. And the need for the state will fade away. And that is the ultimate vision of what Marx called the higher stage of communism. A stateless, classless world based on vast abundance. But in order to get it, you have to get rid of profits in command. You have to have a government that controls the economy in order to make sure there is growth. Because capitalism is the only system in history where poverty is created by abundance. In all the systems of the past, people were hungry because there was not enough food. It is only under capitalism that people become hungry because there is too much food. In systems of the past, people were homeless because there was not enough housing. But only under capitalism do people become homeless because there is too much housing. And I am so tired of hearing about a housing shortage. There is no housing shortage in America. I live in New York City where there are 4 empty apartment units for every homeless person. There is no housing shortage in America. There's capitalism. That's the problem. There's landlords who make profit without people living in the apartment. There's real estate speculation. There is no housing shortage. In this vast country, we've got loads of homes. We've got loads of apartment buildings. We have got housing out the wazoo here in America. But it's privately owned, and the access to it is restricted by the irrationality of the market and the monopolistic power of big corporations. We do not have a housing shortage. We have a housing abundance. And it is this abundance of housing that is creating skyrocketing rent and homelessness rising all across our cities. That's not rational. And in no other system would this even be possible. Capitalism is the system where people are hungry because there is too much food, where people are homeless because there are too many houses, where people go cold in the wintertime because there is too much heating gas. I've told the story, and I want to tell it over and over and over again, of the little boy who says to his father, "Why is it so cold?" The father says, "Because I can't afford to buy any coal to heat the stove." And the boy says, "Father, why can't you buy any coal to heat the stove?" He says, "Because I lost my job at the coal mine." And he says, "Why did you lose your job at the coal mine?" And he says, "Because there is too much coal." That's the capitalist system. And that is why you need a government of action to control the centers of economic power, to control the banks and the credit strings, to control the natural resources, to have an economic development plan, to facilitate where corporations go. You need a state to control the means of production. You need society to control the banks, factories, and industries, so that you don't have the irrationality of poverty created by abundance. This is what we believe. And that what we are going through right now is something that has happened many times before in human history. Let me tell you a story. I'm going to tell you about Arg the caveman. Once upon a time, there was a guy named Arg the caveman. And Arg the caveman was a really, really good hunter. Arg, every time he saw a deer, Arg was really fast, and he would run after the deer and he would kill the deer. And Arg had a wife, and Arg's wife was a really good gatherer. Anytime there were any berries, she knew where to find them. She could dig up roots that were edible. She knew where to find them. She knew exactly what plants to eat and what plants not to eat. She was a really good gatherer. And they had children, and they were really good at hunting and gathering. They could throw sticks and rocks and kill animals and eat them, and they could eat fruits and nuts and plants, and they were really, really good at it. But one day, they got too good at it. And there weren't any more animals to kill. And there weren't any fruits and nuts to gather. And they said, "Oh shit, we've got a problem. We've got a problem." So what did they do? What did they do? Did they say, "Oh no, it's overpopulation," and line up half their kids and kill them? No. Did they say, "Oh, growth is bad. If only we were worse at hunting and gathering. That's the problem. We need to starve ourselves for 5 days." No. They said, "You know what? We have to change the way we do it." And they started growing their own crops. And they started domesticating animals. Because their human creative power, because they had mastered hunting and gathering so well, they'd gotten so good at hunting and gathering, human creative power had outstripped the narrow limits of the hunter-gatherer mode of production. So they had to move to a higher mode of production. So out of hunter-gatherer civilization came a higher mode of production called agriculture. And that's the way humans solve these problems. And a couple thousand years later, the same kind of thing was happening in feudalism. There were food shortages, the population had expanded, there was all kinds of technology that was coming in from the Silk Road, from Asia, and all of that. And so there was a huge explosion, and feudalism was replaced by capitalism. Well, it's that time of the millennium again. Capitalism has become outmoded. And capitalism in its monopolistic stage, and its imperialist stage, has become outmoded. And human creativity and human creative power has expanded beyond the narrow limits of the irrational capitalist system. Just like Arg and his wife got too good at hunting and gathering, we have gotten way too good at technology. Artificial intelligence, we're close to self-driving cars. I mean, we can, and that's good. But in order to keep developing, In order to further unleash human creative power, we must move to a higher mode of production. And that is what is going on in society at this time. Because when it really gets down to it, we human beings are special. What separates humans from animals? What makes us different? There's one difference, which is that every other species merely interacts with its environment. But we, humans, we force the environment to serve us. And this was something that Marx and Engels discovered in their essay on the role of labor in the transition from ape to man. But it's something that you can find in the Bible. I will pull it up for you. You can find this in the book of Genesis in the Bible. I will put it on the screen. This is something that human beings have always known. There's always been something that separates us from animals. And I'm going to put it on the screen so that you can see it. Because this is the essence of who we are. Right? This is Genesis 1 verses 26 verses 28. It says, God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth on the earth. Now you notice it doesn't just say you're in charge of the earth. It says, be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth. Meaning take what is there and make it bigger. Take what you see around you and figure out how to make more of it and how to expand your population, to multiply, how to be fruitful, how to get more out of it, and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over all of it. When it really gets down to it, this is what it means to be a human being. You have within you something very, very beautiful. Something very, very beautiful. You have creativity within you. You have creativity within you. God is the creator of all things. And you have a piece of godlike power within you, which is called creativity. Ants have been making their ant farms the same way for thousands of years. And beavers have been making their beaver dams the same way for thousands of years. But we human beings have something special within us. We have a soul. Right? In the CPI manual, We Are City Builders, I want to point something out to you. Right, this is our first original textbook. In the very beginning, there's a picture of Socrates. And that is the philosopher Socrates, the great thinker of ancient Greece. And he got the death penalty. They said that he was spreading misinformation, that he was corrupting the youth of Athens. And they sentenced him to death because he was spreading malign foreign influence and hurting people's faith in the great democratic institutions of ancient Athens. I'm, of course, being facetious. But yes, they gave Socrates the death penalty. And as Socrates was awaiting death, he gave a beautiful dialogue to his followers called the Phaedo. Right? And I would encourage you to go read the Phaedo, because in the Phaedo, which was transcribed by Plato, Socrates is quoted as giving his lecture on the difference between the soul and the body. And this is heavy stuff. But he argues that humans have a body and a soul, and that the soul is the creative, godlike part of us. And the body is the animalistic part, right? Your body shits, your body fucks, your body, farts, your body gets hungry. Your body is just kind of doing natural processes. But beyond your body, you have a soul. And your soul is what separates you from being an animal. Your soul has creativity, and your soul has a connection to the divine. And Socrates is saying that he is looking forward to death because it will mean the separation of the soul from the body. His soul will be liberated from his body. And that his ability to develop his mind, his creativity as a philosopher, will greatly expand because his soul is no longer attached to his body. Go and read the Phaedo. And what Socrates is celebrating, and he's pointing out in that dialogue, is that we have creative power. We have a godlike quality to us. We are creative creatures. We are not just our bodies. Animals are just their bodies. We are our bodies and our souls. And that these are two different things. You have your soul, your mind, and your body. And that these two are in conflict with each other. But he argues that when he dies, his soul will be liberated from his body, and his ability to be a philosopher and understand the world around him will greatly expand. Well, as much as Karl Marx was an atheist and wouldn't have agreed with that necessarily, when you read what they observed about human beings who force the environment to serve them, you are reading an understanding that we have a creative power. We have this spark of life, this godlike creative power within us. That's why Plato's Phaedo is one of the most beautiful dialogues I've ever read. And that's why, as someone with a Marxist background, I am religious, because I see in Marx's own teaching. In Marx's own teaching, I can see the proof of the existence of the divine, and why human beings are special, and why we are able to constantly reinvent our relationship with nature, and why we can reach a higher stage of development, and why we are creative, and why all of this is happening. No other species is doing what we're doing. The ants didn't have ant-feudalism for a while, and then they had ant-capitalism, and then they have ant-communism. No, ants have been doing it the same way but the reason that we human beings are going through stages, and the reason that we're learning to treat each other better at each stage, we're recognizing each other's rights more at each stage, we're learning to have empathy more at each stage. The reason that we're working things out is because we were created for a purpose. Right? We were created for a purpose. And as human beings, we are constantly trying to reach a higher mode of production, a higher state of existence, a higher population, a higher life expectancy, and a higher connection to God. And that God ultimately has a plan for human beings. Right? Ultimately, we are being tested for something even greater than we can imagine. We are going through a process. The existence of human beings on earth is a process where we are being tested, we are being challenged, we are being taught, we are learning for ourselves certain things that only our Creator has known before. And this is all a very, very beautiful thing. This is all a very beautiful thing. And if you can embrace it, and if you can look at the struggles of today as the world reaching more and more of a state of perfection, and we human beings learning how to overcome our weaknesses and how to be more creative and learning how to master our environment more. If you can understand that that's what we're doing, we human beings, generation after generation, are on a journey that our Creator put us on to test us and teach us something because He has something even better planned for us once we get it all figured out. If you can understand that, you can find a level of peace. A level of peace. And this may sound a little bit weird and wacky and new agey, but this is how I understand the world. And if I just called myself a communist, if I just went around saying I'm a communist, I would be limiting what I have to teach you. Because we've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot. And I have so much more to teach you than just Soviet ML. That we are developing a mode of understanding here that is astronomically powerful. That is a celebration of human creative power. It is a celebration of our Creator who created us and set us on this mission. It is an optimistic worldview that understands that we're reaching a higher state of perfection. That all the trials we face today are simply challenges to make us stronger and better and more effective. And so, what I'm teaching you is a struggle to create a stateless, classless world of vast abundance? Sure. It's a struggle against imperialism. It is a celebration of human creative power. And it is what they are doing in the anti-imperialist countries of the world. It is what the bulk of the planet that has broken out of the domination of imperialism is striving to do, to expand the population, to increase living standards, to eradicate poverty. But if I were simply calling it communism, I would be doing you all a disservice. And especially now, there's a bunch of jokers running around calling themselves communists, jokers who support imperialism, jokers who, hate anti-imperialist countries, jokers that are, I don't know what they're doing. They're doing a lot of silly things. And because communism is associated with a lot of things that we don't believe in. We don't believe in pessimism. We don't believe in destruction. We don't celebrate the eternal rebellion. We don't celebrate the aesthetic of the French Revolution and the guillotine. We don't want vengeance. We're not in this to unleash our sexual, drive and just shoot our sex drive all over everything. All right? We're not motivated by a desire to take revenge against people who are privileged and punish them. And because of that, it makes no sense to just hold on to, oh, we're communists. It makes no sense. Why not give the beautiful thing that we are doing here a unique, beautiful name? Our organization is the Center for Political Innovation. And we are innovationists. Because the essence of what we are doing is celebrating human innovation and human creative power. Innovation and creativity are the spark of divine within all of us. And they are what we are seeking to unleash by moving to a higher stage. It's expansion, it's growth, and it's what we're all about. We are innovationists. Let me repeat this. We are innovationists. We are innovationists. We've called ourselves city builders. We've called ourselves 21st century socialists. We are innovationists. What we are doing as we build an anti-imperialist movement, as we help people find their own inner voice by making morning messages, by writing, by putting on conferences and big events, as we encourage people to find a creative outlet for the passion they feel about the world around them and how it should be better, as we learn to love each other in a sense of community, as we come together to create together, as we challenge the people of our country to really imagine how things could be beyond the irrationality of the markets and the dying imperialist system. As we do all of that, we are innovationists. We are innovationists. We are innovationists. That is what we are. Everything about us, from the top of our heads to the bottom of our feet, to the tingle that we feel when it's time to go out and spread the truth, to the indignation that we feel about injustice, to the joy that we have when we teach people something new, the thrill we get when we're around each other, chanting and singing. We are innovationists. That is what we are. And I wear that name with pride. Because that name takes with us everything that I have learned in the past decade. It leaves behind some of the ugliness and some of the mistakes that have gone on in the history of our movement. It preserves what is good, what is true, and what is essential. And leaves behind the ugliness and the pessimism and the vengefulness and the libidinal, Oedipal complex behind so much of what calls itself leftism. We are breaking new ground. We are innovating. And innovationism is in itself an innovation. And we have done this together. We have done this together. You, me, all of us that are here. We have reached a new plane. We have connected with a higher force, and we are surging ahead as an organization, as a movement, as a school of thought, as an energy force, as a product of our time, as a part of the discourse that can drive us toward a whole new paradigm. We are innovationists. That is what we are. And I am proud to be an innovationist. And I am proud of the movement that we are building. And I am proud of the breakthroughs that we have made. And I'm proud to be on the right side of history. And I am proud to be connected with bigger forces around the world that believe in the exact same thing that I believe here. And I am proud to bring with me positivity. I am proud to create, not compete. I am proud to have a spiritual connection. I'm proud to be motivated by a desire to teach and build and connect and love. And I'm proud to be an innovationist. And I am proud of all of you because we all did this together. We all did this together. Innovationism is a product of all of our hard work and all of our sacrifice and all the lessons that we've learned together. This is stream number 782. 782 times we have come on here and talked. 782 times. And we've learned so much. And we've overcome so much. And we've made mistakes and we've learned from them. And we've advanced 782 times. And our audience has just kept growing. Be proud of what we have here. We are the innovationist movement. And we've already innovated, we've already expanded, and we've already grown. And you ain't seen nothing yet.